What's up, it's Kaero. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are doing part 12 of generating and rating cards made by artificial intelligence using Urzas A.I. The rating system is 0, totally unplayable. 10, totally busted. Thank you for hitting the thumbs up and subscribing to the channel, and I will see you next time for the next episode. Okay, to kick things off, we have a card called No Excuse. One blue, two generic, at instant counter target creature spell unless its controller pays two generic mana. If that spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. Flavor text is: after this mage, so many wizards turn away from the glory of power. Only a few are prepared to use it. All right, so the name of this card is automatically a 10 out of 10 because I'm thinking you use this to counter somebody's win con, and then they scoop and they go, "Oh, if I only had this card or whatever," and then you just go like this, just point to the card name. No excuse. It's such a blue name for a spell. I love it. As far as a 3 mana counter only target creature spell, and then that's not a hard counter, there are much better counter spells out there to use. So I think this is probably like a 2 or a 3 as far as counter spells go. But the fact that it's called No Excuse and it's blue means that I'm going to include it in my decks just for that possibility of being like, no excuse, countered. Here is Stalactite. Two colorless mana for an artifact. Tap it to add a colorless mana, or tap it and sacrifice Stalactite. You gain 3 life. I think this is amazing as far as flavor goes. First of all, a stalactite being in a cave where there's nothing but basically rocks is great flavor and great design on the AI's part for making it colorless mana. And what's the flavor text here? With every breath, you breathe in the stale breath of the empty grave. Are we sure it shouldn't add black mana? Because that's pretty metal. 2 mana to add a colorless. This is good. Like, this is a good mana rock. And then having the upside of also tapping it and sacrificing it to gain 3 life later in the game. This is very good for colorless decks. So I would say it's not good as a general mana rock or a ramp, but it's good in colorless decks. So I'm going to give it like a 5 or a 6. So here's Galvanoff the Goldbloom. 2 blue, 4 generic for a zombie wizard, relevant creature types. Power and toughness 4/4. Text box says whenever another creature you control dies, exile the top card of that player's library face down. You may look at it for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast that card. This is interesting because right off the bat, I think about exiling the opponent's cards face down and playing them, but that's actually not how this card reads. Whenever a creature you control dies, exile the top card of that player being you, your library face down. And then you can play those cards from exile and spend mana as if it were any mana of any color to cast that card. So this isn't really as good as it seems upon first glance. It's exiling your own cards off the top of your library, and then you also are not able to play lands because you have to be able to cast the cards that were exiled using mana of any color. So you're exiling your own cards off the top of your library. This maybe has something to do or some good effects in like a Demir sacrifice sort of thing, but it's kind of in the wrong color. I would think this would be like a Rakdos card. Maybe put a combat ability on it to make it be able to brawl a little bit. But a 6 mana 4/4 that triggers whenever things that you control die to exile cards off the top of your library. I guess it's kind of like card draw. I'm gonna say maybe there's some build around potential in this. I'm gonna say maybe it's a 6, maybe getting up into 7 with formats that I'm not familiar with. If you can let me know in the comments if you have any craziness with Galvanoff the Goldbloom, let me know. But I'm gonna say it's probably like a 6. I don't think it's a crazy bomb that lets you play your opponent's cards. That's not how it reads to me. First white card of the day, Bodyguard of the Anointed. 1 white, 1 generic for a human cleric, relevant creature types. Power and toughness 1/1. Okay. Whenever Bodyguard of the Anointed attacks, target opponent discards a card. Okay. I like this. 2 mana, you play this on turn 2. You're facing a mid-ranger control deck. They don't have anything down yet. If you go first, you attack for 1/1, you get a damage in, they discard a card. They have to deal with this. right? They can't let this be on the board. Even though they're not taking a lot of damage, they can't afford to just let this thing keep going through and discarding cards every turn. The flavor text is, he said it the way they say it. He never stopped fighting. All right. I think this card's pretty good. I think this is like a 7, getting up towards maybe an 8. You play this, you go first turn 2, you start attacking, bam, bam, bam. Possible to get 2 or 3 cards discarded for 2 mana and still having a creature. Maybe you play this in an Urzas base deck where you sacrifice this when they try to remove it, gain some payoffs there. I think it's a 7 or 8. It's pretty strong. Maybe even higher than that. Let me know what you think in the comments. Okay, here's Isolation Critic of Rebirth. 1 blue, 2 generic, and remove something when you cast it. It has no spell type, it has no text box, no power and toughness. It has nothing. This is solely a assert dominance move to play this on your opponent. You put this in your deck when you're super confident, and you just freak your opponent out. On turn 3, they say go, you start your turn, and then you play this, and they're like, what is that? And you're like, your move, your turn, go. And they're like, but what does it do? And you're like, don't worry about it, just go. Take your turn. And they're freaked out, and it gets in their head, right? I also like that this text is devoid of all text box mechanics, everything, nothing, and that the AI also made sort of like a desolate wasteland here, where there's like a few trees, but like it looks kind of like devoid of life for the most part, so it's kind of cool flavor. This card is obviously a 0, but if you have the guts to just put this in your deck and play it on your opponent and be like, go, then hats off to you. Love it. Another colorless card, Mirror Reactor, 4 colorless mana for an artifact creature Mirror at power and toughness 3/3. Sacrifice Mirror Reactor, add 2 colorless mana. Okay. That's actually not bad, because you put this out turn 4, you have a little bit of a 3/3 kind of chump blocker. It can brawl a little bit, right? It's not going to be attacking much only in the case of very slow decks, but then you have the ability to sacrifice it, add 2 colorless mana. So on turn 5, you have the ability to pay 7 for something. So you're getting up to where like Ugin mana, you're getting up there, right? Satisfied is the flavor text. And that is said by fears, hatred, and recoil are all possible feelings. So satisfied is that quote's attributed to fears, hatred, and recoil. Okay. I like the bizarre nature of it. I think it actually could see play in some formats where artifact decks are possible. I think it's probably like a 5 or a 6. Next is Gurmag Angler, 1 blue, 2 generic for a fish creature. It's a 2/2, it has flying. When Gurmag Angler enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you return another creature you control to its owner's hand. That's not very good. What's the flavor? They'll stay by your side if you control them. Braids, the fishing. Unimpressed. Yeah, I would say that I'm with you, Braids. I'm not very impressed with this either. 3 mana flying 2/2 that demands that you return another creature you control to its owner's hand. I know there could be synergies if you have another creature on the field that has like an enter the battlefield effect or something like that, and you can replay it, but I think it's just not good, right? If it had flash, it kind of might be interesting. So you could play this in response to somebody removing your creature, bounce it back to your hand, play it again next turn, something like that. But this is just not, it's not where it's at. I'm going to give this a 1. I'm with you, Braids. Next is Dark Crush. 1 word. Dark Crush. 1 black, 1 generic, instant. Okay. Exile target creature card from a graveyard. Dark Crush deals 2 damage to any target. The flavor text is Ravenous Little Mob. I think this is quite good. There are reanimator decks that care a lot about their graveyard. 2 mana to deal 2 damage to any target is fine, especially in black to deal direct damage to the opponent. Exile creature card from a graveyard in response to them trying to reanimate something. I think it's a good sideboard card for sure, and I think it could see main deck play in certain formats, especially in limited. That's not bad. Dark Crush, I love the name. The name is 11 out of 10. I think the rating on it is going to be like a 5 or a 6, maybe? Higher than that for sideboarding? Let me know what you think about Dark Crush. Red card, Sentinelic Reckless. 1 red, 2 generic for a human rebel. 2/2 power and toughness. Whenever Sentinelic Reckless attacks, choose one. Creatures you control get +1/+0 till end of turn. And until end of turn, Sentinelic Reckless deals 1 damage to target creature or planeswalker. But only till end of turn that damage is done. Okay. The flavor text is the best attack isn't the one you need most. Interesting. What do we think about this? This is a 3-drop 2/2 with 2 modes on it. It can kill something. That's a 1/1 2/1 3/1 when it attacks. Or Planeswalker. Good with dealing with Planeswalkers that have been drained of their loyalty down to 1. And also has that mode that creatures you control get +1/+0 till end of turn. So something like tokens where you're just putting out tons of 1/1 creatures, you could really punish somebody with this thing. And I really like the modal effect on here. So when it's attacking even by itself, it's a 3/2, right? Because you can choose that. And then you can attack with it and kill something. I think this is pretty good. This is a good build around for an ultra fast red aggro deck. It is in the right color for this. If this was blue, it'd be like pretty useless. But I think it's like a 6 or a 7 maybe. If it had haste, it would be actually really cool as an enabler. If you had a bunch of little goblin tokens or something, you slam this, haste, go. I think it's like a 7. I like Sentinelic Reckless. Next we have Planar Titan. 1 white, 2 generic for a giant. 4/4. That's pretty good power and toughness for 3. When Planar Titan enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you return a non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. Okay, -2. Target creature gets +2/+2 till end of turn. So that's like a Planeswalker loyalty ability on a creature. So you're not going to be able to pay that. Are there any cards that make creatures into Planeswalkers? Like I know there's, in New Capenna recently we had Luxior Giada's Gift, which made Planeswalkers into creatures, but is there any card that you guys know of that makes a creature into a Planeswalker so you could pay this ability? That's really funny. Flavor text is a massive weight makes it far too slow to get up and away. Alright, so unless this can become a Planeswalker somehow, it just enters the battlefield and gets sacrificed unless you return a non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. There could be ways that that is beneficial, but again, you want to have the option to do that. You don't want to have to do that, and I think it's just not worth it. I think it's like a 2. Another white card, Roll into Dust. 1 white, 3 generic for an instant. Roll into Dust deals 2 damage to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. Alright, it's overcosted removal. It's not very good, but just being able to say, I roll into Dust your creature would be fantastic. And what's the flavor text? Nothing could survive 100 miles of dust. That's true. So it's just a spell that you cast on a creature and you be like, come here, roll you into dust and throw you in the dustpan. 4 mana, 2 damage. Not so great. The card, I mean, Roll into Dust is a 10, the name, but it's like a 3. What's up next? Goof Squall. Alright. 1 blue, 2 generic for a beast. It has flash. It has flying. It's a 3/3 for 3. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Goof Squall unless you discard a card. And the flavor text is don't throw things. Okay. 3 mana, 3/3 flying for 3 and flash. In the beginning of your upkeep, you have to sacrifice it unless you discard a card. So, in the previous video, I had a card, I couldn't remember what it was, that somebody said in the comments, like, oh, this would be really good with Madness. So I think with keeping that in mind, this is good with Madness. You play this for 3 on the opponent's turn, you block something, kill one of their creatures, it comes to your upkeep, you discard a card with Madness, you get to play that for the alternate cost, and then you just get to keep swinging in. I think Goof Squall is actually pretty good, maybe in like a Dimir deck with some Madness going on with it. The name is awesome. I haven't laughed that hard in a little while reading one of these cards, and I think it's like a build around, right? It has to be in the right deck, but I think it could be a 7 or an 8. Next is Forced Wound. 1 white, 3 generic instant. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Okay. Not great for that cost. We'd want that to cost like 2. What's the flavor text? Let this broken-hearted ghost griffin tell you what it meant to him to be human. And who said that? Commander Hyena. Nice. That art is extremely creepy. I find that unnerving because I can't really tell what it is. It's like a furry something, like a maybe that's the ghost griffin, and it has like long flippers on the bottom, and it's illuminated only by this like green ghostly light in the background. It's sort of like Cloverfield type effect where you kind of never see a full view of the monster, so it's super creepy. Card's not good. Flavor text is good. Art is amazing. I'm gonna give it like a 2, but I really enjoyed the art. And Commander Hyena. Next is Armored One Sauruses. Armored One Sauruses. Onosauruses. 1 green, 3 generic for a dinosaur. 3 power, 3 toughness. Whenever Armored One Saurus attacks, it gets +1/+1 till end of turn for each other attacking creature you control. Okay? Wish it had trample. Look at that art. Look at the art. It is a dinosaur with like a crab claw for a head, and it's wearing Crocs. That is amazing art. I love it so much. That's a scary one Saurus. The card itself, I guess it's like a 3, but the art, the crab claw face dinosaur wearing Crocs, it's like a 10. The flavor text is it protects the rest of the length of the war pain it's on. I don't know what a war pain is, but you protect it, crab claw croc dino. Good for you. Next up is Rubble Belt Skeleton. 3 generic artifact creature skeleton, so it can be played in any deck. That's cool. It has star 1 power and toughness. Rubble Belt Skeleton's power is equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards with the same name as Rubble Belt Skeleton. Okay. 3 generic, tap it, untap Rubble Belt Skeleton. This is the worst card I've ever seen, I think, on here. So it's 3 generic. It's a 0/1 unless, I guess, if you're not playing Commander, it's maybe a 1/1 if your opponent also has a Rubble Belt Skeleton, right? I'm trying to keep Commander in mind when I'm rating these two, but like if you're playing a format where you're allowed to have 4 of these in your deck, best case scenario is that you have a Rubble Belt Skeleton on the battlefield and you have 3 in your graveyard and it's a 3/1. Or if your opponent has 3 in the graveyard, it's a 6/1, I guess. This is so bad. It's a 0 or a 1, but I loved it so much. What's the flavor? What bones it takes to grow to then consume. A 0. A 0. Next up is blue card, Glitter Fire with a Y. 1 blue mana instant, kicker of 1 blue mana, 1 generic. You may pay additional that to cast a spell, but kicker doesn't do anything, okay? Counter target spell if its mana value is less than or equal to the number of lands you control. Alright, so let's walk through this. You play a land, your opponent goes, they play a 1-drop, you can counter it if you have Glitter Fire, and so it goes for turn 2 and turn 3. And then later on, you can hard counter or counter something for like 7 if you go first and you have more lands, right? Or if you have some sort of ramp. I don't think it's very good. I think it's pretty bad actually. I mean, yeah, you can counter something for 1 mana and it's unconditional. It's not like a creature only or something, but just if you have less lands and they play something big, it's not good. Granted, you can counter something later in the game for 1 mana if they play like a 2 or 3 drop on turn 5 or something. I don't know. What do you think? I'm kind of at a loss of Glitter Fire. I don't think it's very good, but I could be missing something. What's the flavor text? When Glimmerfire enters the battlefield, you can watch the skies and hear the calls of all manner of kites. All right, cool. Yeah, I'm gonna give this like a 3, maybe. I don't know. I feel like it's either a 1 or like an 8. That makes sense. Let me know in the comments. Okay, next up is Blind Worm Worm. 1 green, 3 generic for a worm. That's good that it is a worm. We know that for sure. It's a 6/6 or 4 mana. When Blind Worm Worm attacks, put a -1/-1 counter on it. Interesting. So if you have a way to negate those -1/-1 counters, maybe you have a way to put +1/+1 counters on something and kind of get rid of that effect. Or if you can move -1/-1 counters off of this onto something else, maybe it's like a good build around. Doesn't have trample though. I wish it did for it to be a 6/6 to get that damage through. Automatically, if it's attacking, it's already a 5/5 though, right? So it goes down. That's quite a downside. What's the flavor text? They aren't as strong as worm goblins, but they fight even harder. What's a worm goblin? We're gonna have to put that in next. This card is like a 3. Let's go with worm goblin. See what that is. All right, so here it is, worm goblin. 1 red, 2 generic for a goblin rogue. 2/2. It has flying. 2/2 flying for 3. When worm goblin enters the battlefield, target creature gets +2/+0 till end of turn. Okay, I can see this being relevant in goblin decks. I wish it did a little bit more, had a permanent, like maybe you got a counter on something. But 2/2 flying for 3 is not bad. Look at that art. That art's really cool. It looks like some sort of like Warhammer miniature or something that's unpainted. I like that a lot. What's the flavor text? 1 broken tail sets the party back, but no one inside can hear it. All right, sort of nonsensical, but this would be pretty good in a really aggressive deck in limited. I don't know if it can see much play other than that, but I really like the flavor and that it's a goblin rogue that flies. That's cool. I'm gonna give it like a 3 or a 4.